Hello and welcome to the Turn by Turn podcast. Today we become duel masters in what can only be described as the greatest card game that's ever been invented in the history of card-based games. Chris, what are we talking today?
I was trying to come up with a witty answer, but the best I could come up with is I was born a duel master. And no, we are not talking about the game Duel Masters. That is not the best card game ever made.
We are talking Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically, Yu-Gi-Oh! The Sacred Cards, which is a Game Boy Advance game, and it may have been released on some other titles, but
I think it was just Game Boy Advance.
Was it? Okay. So that's definitely where we both played it.
Yeah, there was definitely no shortage of Yu-Gi-Oh! Games on other consoles, though.
It's partly a tribute episode because the creator of Yu-Gi-Oh!, who Chris will tell you now,
yes, Kazuki Takahashi,
recently passed away. So it's sort of been in the front of our heads. So I guess the first thing we have to do is, are you a Yu-Gi-Oh! Fan in general?
I would say generally yes. I grew up playing the card game and watching the show and reading the manga. Um, all the originals and stuff, even like Season 0, which I love very much. And then I kept on into Yu-Gi-Oh! GX when that started. I didn't like the main character really at all, Jaden. He was definitely kind of cringy. And I'm wondering how much of that was the dub. I'm wondering if the Japanese version of Jaden is different, because I remember he was always shouting this stupid catchphrase, get your game on, all the time. To the extent that like it kind of reminded me of Naruto shouting believe it. But in the Japanese version, Naruto doesn't shout believe it all the time. It's like a weird translation choice. So it's actually just occurred to me that Jaden might be that way too. My mom took me to see the movie in theaters, The Pyramid of Light. So I did that. And then finally, the last one I really tried was 5Ds. I was still kind of around. And I just couldn't get into 5Ds at all. And that was about the time that I stopped playing the card game because I just didn't care as much about the characters at that point. Like, I didn't like the GX or 5D's shows very much. So I didn't care very much about the cards because part of it was the story for me. And like, it felt better to get cards, even bad cards, that I cared about them more because I had some sort of story association with them back in those early days. Like, if you pull out Celtic Guardian, it's not the best card, but that's like one of Yugi's cards, so you're still kind of happy to be like, ooh, he's cool and I've got him now and stuff like that. I just didn't have that with the later ones. And then the rules also, there was some power creep, definitely, in Yu-Gi-Oh! That cards made later had to be better than cards made before. So we just started having better and better cards. The old cards I liked got less and less usable. And then we just kept growing the rules and expanding a lot, to where, to me, today, I still watch some Yu-Gi-Oh! Creators. My favorite is Team APS, so shout out to those guys. They're awesome. And they make it fun for, the old people like me. But whenever they do modern stuff with Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's just totally unrecognizable to me.
So you do know your Karibo from your Jinzos, is what you're saying.
I do. Yeah, so I still care about the franchise to some extent. I don't actively go out and buy cards, but it's still one that's near and dear to my heart, and I still like Yu-Gi and Friends and all that.
So I'm a little less well-versed than you are. So, because I only know the original series, the original 2 or say 3 seasons. So growing up, I did have a dual disc. That was like my big Christmas gift one year.
Oh, I did too.
It was wildly disappointing when I was the only person who got one. So it's like, yeah, I'll use mine. You just put yours on the table.
Oh, that's totally what we did.
So,
and then sometimes the dual disc was like uncomfortable on your arm or something, so you just set the dual disc on the table.
Yeah. At the time, though, it was like the coolest gift you could get.
Yeah, I don't remember how I got mine. It might have been a gift from a friend or something, or just a friend that was quitting Yu-Gi-Oh and was like, "Here, do you want all this stuff?" Like I've had several friends just do that for some reason, and I'm like, "All right, sure." And so I've still got all my old cards and stuff. And one of my first like adult purchases after I moved out of my parents' house, one of the very first things I did actually was it was close to when Toys R Us was going out of business. And I went to kind of just have one last look around. Because I used to go to Toys R Us as a kid too. And I saw on a display they were selling sets of the Egyptian god cards. So I was like, I always wanted those as a kid, and I'm not like actively playing Yu-Gi-Oh anymore, but I'm gonna buy those because I just always wanted them as a kid. So I got to do that, and I still have those on my shelf, and I'm very happy to. The winged dragon of Ra is the best one, just by the way.
That's probably fair. I liked that. I was
I'm
rewatching.
talking subjectively, by the way, not objectively. Like, don't come at me with like, well, Cypher's the best because he. I don't know. I'm talking about which one I think is the coolest.
I like that I did a rewatch of the show recently. Not for this, just like in general, as like background noise.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like when they're introducing like the winged dragon of Ra, there's like a throwaway line that's like, this thing has like powers that nobody even knows because like they can't read the text anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, that's probably pretty helpful in a duel. Like, what if it's something bad?
Well, that's why you house rule it to be something good.
But since I can't imagine us necessarily bringing up another Yu-Gi-Oh episode, um,
Oh, I already have one in mind. I'll
oh,
let that float out there and.
we'll see if anyone latches onto it. But I was going to say, let's talk quick about some of the other games in the series, because I thought this game, which is the Sacred Cards, was sort of structured miles better than any of the other games in the franchise of the video game versions of this.
The only which other ones did I play? One of the ones I played was I got the hankering actually kind of for the Sacred Cards and just to play again. So I bought like Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship World Tour something, like 2014, 2015. It was something like that for the DS. And it might have been 2013. And I remember that it was Yu-Gi-Oh! GX themed, and you joined one of the houses and you had an avatar that you could dress up in like the outfits and stuff, but there was no overworld really, or story really to speak of. It was mainly about just duel after duel after duel, which I mean, I guess is what a lot of people want from a Yu-Gi-Oh game.
I have not played that one, but the other one in the series that I have played was called Eternal Duelist Soul, which I think was also for GBA. And that
Which
one,
great name, great name.
it is a good name. I'll give it that. But it has like the slowest pacing I've ever seen in a game. Like you start with like 200 HP monsters. It's just like wild.
Yeah, that does sound weird. I did play some other ones. One was, what was it called? Dungeon Dice Monsters for the Game Boy Advance.
Okay, sure.
I had that, and my little brother, actually got really into that one. And Japan actually got that as a physical game, so my brother actually imported a lot of those, and we used to play with the actual Dungeon Dice Monsters, and that was pretty fun.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah, he was that. My brother gets really, really into stuff, so he doesn't get into things halfway. So when he's into something, he's into it. So he had made like boards and stuff for it, and we had the little miniature guys that you would put on the dice, and the dice you would roll, and then they'd fold out into the platforms for him to stand on. It was very cool.
I think I would have been more into that had the episodes made sense. Like the rules of Dungeon Dice Monsters in the show are like massively convoluted because the creator of the game is kind of cheating. Almost everyone in Yu-Gi-Oh games are cheating, but
I was about to say that the anime does not make it clear what the rules are at all
no.
for
So
anything.
I would have probably leaned more into it had I understood it at all.
It helped learning to play on the Game Boy Advance because you can't do the wrong move. Like, it lays out pretty clearly what the rules are, and then it was a good way to get into it. And then I had one more game, but I'm not going to talk about that because that's the one I'm interested in doing a future episode on.
Okay, so that's the bait right there. If you want to find out what potentially GameCube game that Chris is talking about, leave us a comment and let us know that you need more Yu-Gi-Oh talk in your world. Because I'm not sure if there is like a Yu-Gi-Oh podcast.
I'm sure.
Maybe
Let me help you. There is. There
there
has to
is.
be.
So if there's not, maybe that'll be Chris and I's new podcast down the road.
Oh, I definitely couldn't do that.
Me neither. But to get back to this game, the Sacred Cards, what was sort of your like first impression of like the overall game? So basically, it's a semi-open world pixel art sort of RP text or a card-based RPG. So what do you think of it overall?
I think that it is very rare to have a single player like card based game where you also are a guy in the world and you run around and do stuff. Like, there just isn't a whole lot of that because most of the time it is like the world championship games where it's just, all right, you're in this battle and you navigate the world through a menu, not by walking around. I do feel like the sort of successor to this, and some people might disagree, is the Gwent stuff that the Witcher series is doing with CD Projekt Red. Because as far as I understand, in that you can kind of travel the world and play Gwent, and it also reminds me of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic playing Pazak with people. You could collect Pazak cards and travel the galaxy, and you're doing all these other things, but every once in a while you can just throw down and play Pazak with somebody and be like the Pazak champion as a side quest. And so this kind of reminds me of that, and to me this is kind of the successor to all those.
Mm-hmm. And I think that you covered that really well, is that it does feel unique that you are a character in the world and you actually get to engage with the world rather than just battle after battle after battle. Like it contextualizes it a little better, and then just to sort of dig into the plot a little bit. So it follows the plot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 2, the like Grandmaster Championship that Kaiba sets up after
Battle City.
Battle City. So one thing I wanted to get your opinion on was, how did you feel about it mirroring Season 2, but like creating a full new character and having him sort of take over plot threads from other characters, but having the other characters still like affiliated?
As a kid, didn't even notice, really. Didn't even come to mind. It was just, oh, I get to do these things and stuff, and I thought it was really, really fun. Because that's what I want to be doing. I want to fight all these important people and all these villains from the show. But to prepare for this episode, I actually did write down something that I didn't think about as a kid. I listened to a YouTube kind of retrospective of it by a content creator by the name of Power Pack. So go check him out on YouTube if you want to watch the same thing or just check out more Yu-Gi-Oh content. He was great. But one of the things he brought up that he kind of reminded me of was, he was like, what these plot lines are because you either read the manga or you watched the show. And some things were exclusively from the manga even, because the show was not brought over in certain seasons of the show, like season 0, were not in English at the beginning. They were not brought over. So I think one of the things he referenced was like, you meet Bakura at the museum and Bakura says like, yeah, like I'm into tabletop gaming or something. But that never shows up in the original anime that we had in the States. So I knew what that was because I had read the manga and I knew about Dungeon Dice Monsters and all that. But anyway, he said all of these dark things, like what Merrick is wanting to do, and all of the like tragedy that is befalling these characters. Your main character really doesn't know anything about. He's entered this tournament because he wants to play a children's card game, and he eventually like prevents the apocalypse from happening, not because he has the the Millennium Puzzle or any other Millennium item, or because he has anything driving him to from that realm, he prevents like the apocalypse from happening because he wanted to win at a children's card game. And I find that really funny. That it's just like, you kind of make a mockery out of Yugi and friends. That it's like, it's not you guys, it's not the Pharaoh, it's not the chosen one, it's me. It's a guy, it's the kid with the backwards hat that was cool in the 90s, and I'm the Game Boy. It's me.
Yeah, it's really cool because if that's like so RPG to like literally like put you in the story as the character. And you don't see that with a lot of like adaptation things. It's just, oh yeah, it's a Yu-Gi-Oh game, you are Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It is interesting that it makes it all about you. Um, And while we're on the topic of story, I do want to give the development team a lot of props for not censoring it, because the anime over here was heavily censored. And to this day, I've still got a big dislike of 4Kids for all the work they do to censor stuff. Like it just sucks, man. Um, and I was reading the manga and all these things that were not censored, so I already knew. But some of the great moments, like in the card shop. Are you okay with me jumping to that in plot? Okay, so for those of you who aren't familiar with the story, or just not familiar with this part of Yu-Gi-Oh, there's a guy named Pandora that takes over the card shop, and he's got this mask and top hat on, and he says, "You have to play a game with me in the basement of the card shop." And so you go down there with him, and in the actual story, Yugi is normally the one that does this, but he locks your leg into a shackle, and after the duel starts, some two big saw blades come out, one for each of you, and as you lose life points, which are your sort of health points in Yu-Gi-Oh, the saw blade gets closer to cutting your leg off. And I thought as a kid, even, I was like, that's so cool. Like, there's real stakes to this. It's not just a game. Like, that made it feel like a boss fight. That made it feel really different than, and of course, if you lose, they don't show it or anything like that, but they didn't have to. It was just the idea. But that made it feel so different in terms of flavor, sort of, than just dueling one of these random nameless NPCs on the street.
it gives, like you were saying earlier, it gives a lot of weight to the duels that you're facing named characters rather than just like Bug Catcher like 3 or like
Well,
in Pokemon, you face a lot of generic people.
it's not just that. It's again that you're not navigating through menus. I'm not seeing a little cutscene of Pandora, like not even a cutscene, but like a little, floating head of Pandora saying, "Here's what I've done" and stuff. I can see the saw blade. I can see it there next to my character's leg, and that's what tells me it's happening. It's not that I'm on a menu with a generic background that kind of resembles the room we're in, and he just tells me that's happening, and then the duel starts. Like, it's all things that I get to see happen, and that just makes it feel so much more immersive.
Hmm. And it's pixel art all the way through. It's not like there are cutscenes of like footage essentially.
Yeah, yeah, but I really liked the pixel art. Like, I think it looks really, really nice. I don't know what you thought.
Yeah, I think it looks really good, especially like for that time period.
Yeah, yeah, and especially the card art too. A lot of the games, I think even the DS one I had, um, just color coded the cards to be what they were, and then the text was below them to kind of tell you what it was. But
Hmm.
they all looked like generic cards, until you hovered over them, and then the top screen would display what the picture of that card looks like with its actual text. This game, the card art is on the small cards. Like, it doesn't look great, but it looks good enough that without hovering over a card, I can tell what that card is supposed to be, because I, have read it at least at some point and put it into my deck. So it's really nice to keep track of things. And I've heard that's why they limited the cards as well, because normally your hand size is 7, and they cut it down to 5. It seems like that's why they did that, because if it was 5, then we could fit 5 actual full art cards on the Game Boy Advance, and I definitely think that was a worthy change.
And it is nice to be able to, like, when you buy cards at the shop, you can sort of see get the sense of what it is. That was what annoyed me about Eternal Duelist Soul, is that when you're looking at the cards, if I'm remembering properly, it doesn't give you anything. So, like, you at least have something to go on in this game. So, oh yeah, that's Summon Skull.
Right. And we definitely have to bring up, too, the jukebox looking thing in the corner. That the way that worked is it had, like, a keypad on it. And if you put in the code, that the little production code that was at the bottom of your Yu-Gi-Oh cards in real life, you would get those cards in the game. So that was always really neat, too.
That's another great example of, like, weird crossovers that exist, but maybe they shouldn't.
Or I think it definitely should.
Maybe it shouldn't, but, like, it's cool that it happened to work, or that they went there.
Yeah,
like, it should exist. It's just cool that it can.
Yeah, it's a lot about attention to detail. It feels like the people that made Sacred Cards really cared about Yu-Gi-Oh! To me. It wasn't just let's quickly do this and that'll be that. It was just, this was like, all right, they were looking at it and it was like, we're not gonna make a Yu-Gi-Oh! Simulator, we're gonna make a game that's gonna have Yu-Gi-Oh! In it.
Mm-hmm. I would totally agree. So the plot is obviously, it follows the whole Battle City plotline, except for the random couple of episodes where they go to Kaiba Island and shenanigans happen. But
yeah, that was like filler though. That wasn't like the anime had filler during this. It wasn't the actual author and creator didn't create those things, so they just ignored that.
Mm-hmm. And I think I'm pretty happy with that. Although that could make an interesting side game, but I'm glad they stuck to just the season 2 plot. Were there certain, like, characters from the game and the show that seemed more fun to you, that stick out?
Oh yeah. I mean, we've always got our favorites, but going to the graveyard and seeing bones, that was cool.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not you don't see a picture that looks like a graveyard. You go behind this building and there's like an alleyway, this kind of dark and dingy alleyway, and you walk through the alleyway, and as you come out to the end, in the middle of this like New York City looking, cityscape, there's just this dim graveyard back there with grass growing and graves. And this guy Bones, if you know Yu-Gi-Oh, he's just back there waiting for you to come up and duel him. And I was like, oh, this is so much fun. Some of the other ones I really like. I've always liked Rex Raptor. I like Bakura. He's pretty fun. Everybody has to like Bandit Keith if you're American, I think. I mean, that's our guy, right? That's how they see us.
Flattering.
Huh?
Flattering.
I mean, to some extent, like, he's cool. So I'm like, sure. I'm good with being represented by G.I. Joe with a red, white, and blue bandana on his head.
Cheating every time.
Yep. And then my absolute favorite Yu-Gi-Oh character is actually Merrick. I've always found him super cool.
Merrick is definitely awesome.
Who are your favorites?
I liked Esperoba. I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like you were saying, it's just kind of fun to mentally associate it with the characters from the show and, like, contextualizing them from season 1. I think this game does have a lot of potential appeal to someone who isn't super keyed in on the series too, though, just from the mechanics perspective of it. So, like, if you don't know the series, there's probably still some value. And after the break, we'll go into the mechanics of the cards and everything.
Yeah, because they do not work like the rest of the series. So even if you are super into the series, that's only going to help you a limited amount, because they change what a lot of the cards do, and they change a lot of the rules for this game.
Yeah, and I'm imagining that's partly limitations of the Game Boy, they went so hard at other parts of this game that I think we can probably forgive the card mechanics that they couldn't fit in.
I am going to make a bold claim and say I think that maybe their game is better.
Better than the show? Or the real life experience?
I think their game is better than the current real life experience by a mile. And I think that it's been better than the real life experience for a number of years now.
Interesting. I don't know enough about the modern day Yu-Gi-Oh experience to speak to that. So I'm just going to let it sit there. And then if someone wants to grab it in the comments and roll with it, go right ahead.
I'll get into that more when we get into the second half of this.
Right. So we're going to cut to a quick break and we will be right back. Bye.
Psst, hey you, come over here.
Who, me?
Yeah, you.
Okay.
Hey, do you like Zelda?
Yeah, I like Zelda. Who doesn't?
Oh yeah? You like video games?
Yeah, I dabble, I play them, yeah.
Yeah. Do you like listening to people talk about video games?
Of course I like listening to people. Who reads anymore?
Well, buddy, do I got a podcast for you. It's called Fan Fiction, with an X.
Oh.
And you can find it on all your major podcast distributors.
That sounds amazing.
Oh, buddy, you have no idea.
One question, though. Why are you in my room?
Hey, this is TC.
And this is Jim from the Studio Demands It podcast,
Where every episode we take a demand from a hypothetical studio,
which could be you,
and challenge ourselves to conceptualize, pitch, and craft a film based on the stipulations
or the demands
we are given. We talk about movies all the time. Particularly, we complain about the choices made in the films we've seen.
We're nerds like that.
And, of course, like any good nerd does, we automatically assume that we could do better.
Even with the demands and restrictions that clearly must have been put on by a production.
So head on over to studiodemandsit.com and listen to our previous library of episodes. Our library of previous episodes. Our precious library, Jim. Our library of precious episodes.
You're a pirate, Smeagol.
Okay, so head on over to studiodemandsit.com to listen to our library of episodes.
And submit your demand for a future episode, too.
So go do that.
Okay, bye.
Okay, end of ad.
Hello, and we are back from our break. You just heard some ads for some pretty cool shows, but you're back now, and we are still talking the Sacred Stones, and now we're sort of going to get to the gameplay, what we'll call, rather than Heart in the Cards, we'll call it Heart in the Algorithm.
Oh yeah, my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh game, by the way, is Yu-Gi-Oh! Path of Radiance.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Path of Radiance?
Yeah, you said we're talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! The Sacred Stones.
Oh, I did. Oh, that's terrible. It's all downhill after 30 is what that's chalked up to.
Hey, I mean,
the Sacred Cards.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Did make 3 houses first. These are all Fire Emblem references for you Yu-Gi-Oh! People that are not RPG people.
And for you Fire Emblem fans, we've done a lot for you.
Yes, we have. And will continue to.
Exactly. So hang tight.
You ungrateful. No, I'm just kidding.
Jesus Christ. 3 people just paused and left 1-star reviews.
Yep.
So this is our first deck-based game that we've talked about. So just real quick, what is your history with deck games?
You mean card games?
Yeah. So
I played Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Growing up. I didn't play Pokemon with the right rules, obviously. Also, very often house ruled Yu-Gi-Oh! So it wasn't like we played with super proper rules either, but it was a lot closer. I actually did play Duel Masters for a little while. I played Bakugan for a little while. Played Hearthstone for a little while. Played the World of Warcraft card game for a while. I played quite a few. And then more recently, I've gotten into Fire Emblem Cypher, which is the Fire Emblem trading card game.
Okay. So my history with card deck games is the Sacred
We're talking
Stone.
about specifically like trading card games.
Yes.
Because I've played tabletop games with cards a whole lot more, but won't get into all those.
That'll be our tabletop episode. So my history was this game. This is the only deck-based game I've played. I'm in a slow process of playing through Batten Kaitos because I want to do an episode on it down the way. But that's been a slow grind because I just haven't had time because other things keep boiling up. But for this game, like we've said, like the deck building feels very like organic and doesn't feel forced, and it doesn't feel overly complicated. So basically, as you duel characters, real and just sort of computer generated ones, you gain higher deck ante, which allows you to add better cards to your deck.
Yeah, it's called like capacity, I think, that your deck has a certain capacity and then various cards have certain point values that take up more capacity in your deck. So the strategic thing there is you can have like one really good card and hope that you end up with that card in your hand, or you can spread it out more over longer stretches and have, you know, more cards that are worth more and have not as good of cards, but more of them. So you kind of have to play the odds on that one and make the deck that you want to make. And it, to me, I really liked that because it gave me a reason to think about some of these cards that normally are not very good. You don't want to just spam the most optimal cards all the time. Or maybe that is what you want to do, and what I've just described sounds like a nightmare, but it was fun to me. Something that I liked doing with my brother as well, and some of my friends growing up, was coming up with like almost like Pokemon gym leader kind of things, and coming up with really strict criteria on the cards you could have in decks and things. So like, you know, you're going to be the dinosaur guy today. So you can use any of these cards that you want, but they've all got to be dinosaur themed, and you've got to have, you know, do the best you can with that. It's fun to kind of try and wrap your head around that and think about these cards that you're like, would I use this in a normal deck? Never. But like today, it has purpose for me. And so I really like that kind of challenge.
So you really enjoyed the deck building side of it then?
Yeah, I did. I thought that was really fun, and that's something that even today I still think is fun.
Mm-hmm. And I think I go back and play this like periodically for the very reason that you have a lot of like versatility with your decks. Like you could do like a monster deck, but you could also do like a metal monster deck.
I always have a monster deck.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I had to get one in there. But I think that a lot of this talk too, we need to preface with the rule change. Because we talked about how the rules are very different than normal Yu-Gi-Oh! And the best way I can imagine, or the best reason I can imagine, is that they, for some of these rules, they wanted to be like, well, on the Game Boy Advance, Pokemon is popular, so we should implement some of those Pokemon-like rules. And I assume you know what I'm getting at.
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay. They were like, at the top right of every Yu-Gi-Oh card, there's a type there. It can be light, dark, you know, earth, wind, whatever. They thought that because that was really important in Pokemon, it should be a lot more important in Yu-Gi-Oh, I guess. If you have the type advantage on someone, so like let's say Weevil. Weevil is the little bug guy with the big glasses. He uses almost exclusively bug monsters, which are like grass. So I remember I got this little like fire cobra thing, this little fire snake. I forget what its name was. But if you have the type advantage, your card beats their card. Yeah, so if he puts out his best monster, the Insect Queen, which has like I think 2200 attack, and he attacks into your little fire snake that has 450 attack, you win. you win that exchange. You kill the insect queen because you're fire and she's grass. And I do think that there should be some room there. I think that should have been a modifier a little bit more than that much of a deciding factor. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, so there were obviously times where you can get really, 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 really screwed by that.
Yeah, or you screw somebody else. I mean, you go to the aquarium or the water park. I forget what it is. I think it's an aquarium. And then a bunch of people there have water types. So you just pull out electric lizard and no one can kill your electric lizard, or it's very, very difficult for them to do so.
It really removes some of the balance because you can go on like runs where you'll knock out like 6 monsters. Then they suddenly get like a monster that's not status averse, and it wipes out your thing, and it kind of like stalls you out for a turn or two until you get another, like in this case, like electric lightning one. So like it can be like super useful until it's immediately not.
Yeah, and for those of you who are wondering how this works in terms of life points, because normally if you attack into a monster and you have the higher attack points, the difference in attack points is taken as damage to the player in terms of their life points, which usually start around 8,000. It does not do any life point damage if you defeat someone by using the type advantage. It just counts as a destruction, and that's it.
So is that something that like really irked you, or did you just come to accept it pretty quick?
Came to accept it pretty quick, but there were definitely times it was frustrating because it's a lot to remember. And I wrote down the way it works. Some of them make sense. It's like, fire beats grass, grass beats water, water beats fire, that kind of thing. But then there's light and dark. So they made they didn't want to throw light and dark in there because that would complicate it. So they added 2 new types of elements. They added Dream and Fiend. And again, shout out to that YouTuber Power Pack, because I definitely would not have remembered this all that time on. He has a really good synopsis of it, but he points out that Fiend is also a monster type in terms of not element, because monsters also have types, like warrior, spellcaster, lizard, things like that. So it's really weird that one of them is Fiend. So you can have a Fiend element Fiend monster, and it gets a little weird. But the way that works is light beats Fiend, dark beats light, dream beats dark, and Fiend beats Dream. And so as a kid, that was way too much for me to keep up with. So anytime I was using a dark monster, like I used, because I liked the Pandora fight, Pandora has a special Dark Magician card that has like alternate colors. And so I was rocking that because I thought that was super cool. He wears like a dark brown robe, and I think he's like tan. He's super cool looking. Definitely look him up if you haven't. I think the community today just calls him Dark Magician number 2. I think that's what they settled on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'd send that out sometimes, which takes sacrifices, and then he would just get rocked by I guess he was like a dark type, so he'd get rocked by a dream type monster, and I would be like, oh, I don't even really get how that happened. So that never felt good.
Yeah, that was very defeating if you had like a high level, like 2 sacrifice monster out that with like 3,000 HP and it gets defeated by a 200.
Yeah, and you're not quite sure why.
Yes.
That it's like, why did he beat me exactly? And that I'm no stranger to that happening in Yu-Gi-Oh! Sometimes, that you're like, I don't totally follow the card interaction that just happened. But the game never tells you about these types either. They're completely trial and error. And so it's a little bit weird to kind of get a grasp on that. And definitely as a kid, I just didn't.
Yeah, there's not a super huge tutorial for this, which I think is good and bad because it requires you to figure it out on your own, which can be really annoying for a lot of people. But some people are happy to just kind of figure it out on the go.
Yeah. So how do you feel about this game? Well, you said you don't have a lot of experience, but have you played regular Yu-Gi-Oh before very much?
Yes. So like the table,
Yeah.
like physical card version, yes.
How do you feel about the rules in this as compared to that?
Other than that we've just discussed, it doesn't really bother me. I kind of like the idea of not having to sacrifice, just because it lets you get more interesting things out sooner.
You still have to sacrifice in this game.
No. I like not having to sacrifice.
Oh, okay.
To some extent. Like,
was that
I get
like
it.
a house rule you played with?
On and off, it depends, but it's kind of fun to like get the more exciting things out there rather than like hang out with like a couple like medium HP things that may or may not make it. It's fun to kind of jump right to like the Pumpkin or the Legendary Fisherman or even like a God card, but like it obviously balances it way more. It just leads to more build up while you're waiting to sacrifice to get something that's actually useful.
Yeah, and see, I like the smaller stuff too. Because to me, that's sort of the fun. That's sort of where the trenches is to me. Is like who's going to get that big card out first, and then the reaction of dealing with that. I find that fun.
I would argue in this game that the God cards are like the worst cards you can get.
I didn't really use them in this game.
Yeah, so you can get them and you can use them, but I would argue that they're terrible because they are the 3 sacrifices, and then Slifer's powers are dependent on how many cards you have in your hand.
Yes.
Which are limited to 5, regardless.
You only get 5,000 attack.
Exactly.
I'm just kidding.
So, like, you are limited in your scope of what he can do, and by the point where you've sacrificed 3 monsters to get him out there, your hand's probably not robust and filled.
Well, so a thing I think that really plays into that is game length. Duels in Sacred Cards are resolved much faster than regular rules Yu-Gi-Oh.
Definitely. And I think that,
yeah, you're not gonna like, when you're in a regular game, it's like, at minute mark 10, you might get Slifer or something out, and then you're in a good position. But in this one, by minute mark 2, the game is ending. So it's really rare that you're going to have the chance to get 3 cards on the field, sacrifice them, and then do all these other things. Like, it is a very early game focused sort of meta that this game has you playing.
in the speed of the duel is something I appreciate as well. So I can finish a duel, like a harder duel, in like 5 minutes. But on like the TV show, or perhaps in real life, it lasts 4 episodes.
Yes, I'm going to go again to that same content creator, Power Pack. Another nice little thing he did comparing this game was he said, I'm going to log into Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, which is the current online, platform where people duel with actual rules against each other. And he said, I'm going to do a duel in that, and then I'm going to compare the footage to see how many duels I could finish in Sacred Cards in me doing that. So in the amount of time it took him to complete one actual duel by modern day standards, he was able to complete 11 and a half duels in Sacred Cards.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, so I definitely like the speed at which the duels are played, because you might be like, well, that seems too fast, like you're just getting invested, but no, it is paced really well, I think, and you just move right on to the next one. It's not like when I was playing, one of the World Championship games, it was like, well, now that I've finished one duel, I need to go take a break and decompress. It wasn't like that. It was, I'm ready for the next one, and it just keeps you moving right along.
So I think we're at the point where I want to break we're not usually like a segment show where we do like specific segments of information. We kind of just keep it conversationally, but I want to try a segment for this particular episode called Uncle Daniel's Tips for Winning in Yu-Gi-Oh! The Sacred Cards. And we're still going to continue our conversation, but we'll kind of frame it around these talking points. So my number one tip is that if the algorithm hates you, you're not going to win. So
I mean, that's every card game, though. The RNG sometimes is just not on your side. You end up with a bad hand. The heart of the cards fails you, and it just is what it is.
The heart of the algorithm, like I was saying earlier, just regardless of what you do, if you don't get like anything to work with, you're just not going to win. So there are tips that lead this to be pretty freaking broken. And now we're going to get into those. But at the end of the day, if the algorithm is not in your favor, you're done. And it's very hard to course correct if you start with 5 not very useful cards. So my first tip here is you want a really high HP 4-star monster. And the faster
What do you mean? Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards don't have HP.
What is the modifier for it?
They have attack and defense power.
Oh, okay. So
they have stars that tell you how much you need to summon them.
Yeah, so you want to get the 4-starred high attack powered monsters and get them as quickly as possible. And if you can get about 5 or 6 of them in that like 1400 attack power range, you can beat almost the entire game without having anything higher than that. So
well, that used to be considered high.
Yeah.
You know, at one point, Blue Eyes White Dragon was like the ultimate regular card, and it had 3000 attack. There was nothing, you know, and then the other, just for perspective, for, you know, maybe you're younger, still into Yu-Gi-Oh! And you're listening to this, like, Dark Magician had 2500, Summon Skull had 2200, and these were all considered really, really good high-end cards.
So obviously the way this game works, your deck capacity won't allow you to get those very early, but even if you can get like some 900s in, or even like 750s, you can take control really early because your opponent is just going to put things in defense. So the more you can like pump into your deck, even if it's at the mercy of like having fewer useful things in there, you can kind of take over that way. And one card in particular in the beginning half of the game that you'll want to get is Doron, which is like this weird water spirit thing. And its special effect is that it can double itself. So it has like the 900 attack, and you can double it. And at that point, you have the capacity to eliminate the one defense monster they're playing and then do 900 attack. And you can just continue to wear down the life points that way, which is pretty slow burn. But as the game continues, you get Revival Jam, which has 1500 attack points, and that can double. So then you have 2 of those, which you're able to get that probably about 2/3 of the way through, maybe even earlier, maybe half. And at that point, you can just start really churning out the battles pretty quick, because they're not going to be able to beat your 1500 monster. So they attack you can put something smaller on defense, and then that leaves their monster in attack mode because they attacked your small thing, and you sort of bait them into attacking so you can go right for life points. And then the other tip is the trap cards are pretty broken in this too. So there are multiple trap cards that will destroy under a certain attack level monsters. And there's like 3 different ones. If you load your deck with those, and you can have multiples, I believe up to 3 copies.
Yes.
So if you can get those, you can have 9 like low deck capacity cost cards that'll wipe out monsters under like 1,500 attack points. So you can like literally render like the computer's deck useless, because if they attack, they're just going to disappear. And then that leaves their board open. So if you're fighting like a named character from the show, you're not even going to see their higher level things from the show, because they can't keep anything on the board long enough to get to Insect Queen. Is that stuff like you used a lot, or did you strategize and plan a little more?
I strategized and planned a little more, and I don't know if I ever noticed those cards doing that. My one tip I would say, though, is that this is something else I actually kind of like over regular Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that there are not phases of your turn in this game. You can do pretty much anything in any order on your turn, and I like that. I like that kind of not less rigid structure. So you can do weird interactions, like if I want to summon a 5-star monster, which takes 1 tribute, I can tribute my monster, and then that is stored. Then I can play a magic card like Dark Hole that wipes the board of all creatures or all monsters, but I already tributed the one on my side. Then after that's wiped the board, you can play the monster you were tributing for and then use it.
Oh, that's kind of a broken idea, isn't it? I didn't think to do that.
Yeah, I didn't either, but this was more YouTubers helping me out.
Oh, gotcha.
So that was the main thing. I mostly went in with just the cards I liked, and then I had a couple, because of the element thing, the way that worked, I had a couple of answers to bigger things. Like if we're going against Weevil, I'm using mostly the deck I want to, but that Fire Snake is in there. And then if I'm going to fight Mako, the water guy, I'll mostly use the deck I want to, but Electric Lizard is in there. So that if he does get out, I forget what Mako's signature card is, but if he gets out, any giant water thing that I'm having trouble dealing with, eventually, if I can hang on, that lizard will pop up and will resolve the problem for me.
Yep. My next tip, advice, what have you, is get Summon Sculler Jinzo, and then you don't need any other monsters beyond 2,000 attack points, because they're 1-star, one monster sacrifices. So
I think Jinzo is 2.
No, he's 1.
One is 5 or 6 stars. He
6.
No, wait.
6 under is 1.
6 is 2, isn't it?
Nope. 7's 2.
Okay.
So 5 and 6 are 1, and then 7 and higher are 2 or more, depending on how higher than 7 it is.
Yeah.
So if those 2 cards are really broken, and Jinzo eliminates trap cards, so he's super broken.
Oh, yeah.
His deck capacity cost is super high, so it might not be worth it in that direction. But either one of those are super high level attacks that will just wipe out your squad, and then you don't even need any 2-star summons. Which sort of leads to the next point. The god cards are pretty useless. This isn't like the cut and run, like taking no artistic license to build a fun, interesting deck. This is purely win advice and ideas. So the following cards are useless with that in mind. So the god cards are useless, ritual cards and ritual monsters are useless, 2 sacrifice monsters are useless, high cards with high deck capacity costs are useless, most magic cards are pretty useless, environment changing cards that will like make it a graveyard or an ocean are generally pretty useless.
Those were some of my favorite cards, just by the way.
Exactly. Yeah.
The field spells that would because it's cool because it changes what your board looks like and everything. So it was just a fun, even though they're not the most useful, it was fun to play around with those and just change the environment you're in.
Oh yeah, we'll get to useful things or useful fun things in a moment. This is just the purely I just want to be done with this game and I want to beat it really hard.
Yeah.
So TV show gimmick cards are useless. Exodia is useless. Bakura in his deck has a final magic card system where you slowly place the words final on the board. That's useless. There's a lot of useless stuff in this game, but we're not here to talk about like speed running this and how to do it. So as far as like,
that is probably true of all of Yu-Gi-Oh, though. There is a lot in real life Yu-Gi-Oh. The vast majority of the cards at this point, I would say, are useless. So, I mean, really, they were just ahead.
Yep. But there's a large amount of cards that are available to you. But again, if you take out the useless, if you're in like a just win, basically just need Revival Jam. Like if you could get 3 Revival Jams, you wouldn't need any other cards in your deck. That would effectively end the game. Because you could turn your 3 into like 6, and then they'd never be able to summon a high enough level monster to beat you.
They could use an electric monster.
Oh yeah, that would be the one thing that would stop that strategy from working. Your little electric rattlesnake there. But yeah, I think those are all the advice for just like speeding through the game. But again, I go back to this game to play it to try different things, to not just play it to try different strategies and stuff. So what do you have like certain memories of cards that were useful or fun to include?
I mean, for me, almost all of them. Because I'm the kind of player that, like, if your game is not balanced very well, I don't get upset about it. I'll just start putting, if your game is fun, I don't get upset about it. I'll just start putting restrictions on myself and limiting myself to things that try to keep the game fun and interesting. So I'll try to, you know, if I'm coming up against like Esperoba, let's say, and I want to fight him and not just use a little fairy that invalidates his whole team. Instead, I'll just try, because there's not really a big penalty for trying over and over. So I'll just keep trying and using different decks to see if I can come up with something like, it's sort of like a puzzle, you know? It's like there's a really easy way to solve the puzzle, but it's like, yeah, but I don't want to do it that way. I like to go back and see the different ways that I could potentially solve it and see if I can like brute force it or if I can be smart enough to get around that.
Yep. And I think that's, again, why I like to go back, is that it's not one answer and that your deck doesn't have to be one style. Like each character on the show has their like deck style of choice, for its bugs or dragons or metal monsters, wizards, warriors. So it's nice that you can mix and match, but you could also do like a really structured deck. It sounds like you used to put limitations on yourself, where it's like you have to do like a dragon deck or you have to do like a zombie deck.
Oh yeah, the zombie is a fun one.
The zombie ones are fun. One card that I include in basically every run through is Pump King, and I have no idea why. It's not even a particularly good card in the game because it doesn't have a huge attack level per sacrifice rate, but I always include it because I think it looks funny and cool.
Yeah, I think we've all got those cards we're attached to, and I definitely had some of those. I liked the Dark Magician tree a lot, so I used them a lot.
Did you ever, and I'm not even sure if it's possible in this game, so this might be a good question, go to the Magician of Black Chaos?
I don't remember if he was in that game or not.
I think he might be. The ritual card, so one thing, gripe, might not be the right word, but I'll use it. The ritual cards are pretty weird. Like getting the ritual cards to work is tricky because you have to have the ritual card and the sacrifices, And I believe you have to have the card as well.
Yes.
So, like, you need Blackluster Soldier, the Blackluster Soldier ritual, and then 2 sacrifices.
Yeah, I don't remember if he was in that one either, but he might have been.
Because another thing that I forgot to mention in my little advice that I was giving is if you need to just fill your deck, like if you've completed the other requirements, just shove ritual cards because there's 0 cost.
Oh, yeah.
And you can just kind of put them on the field and forget about them.
Yeah, and it's important, I think, to highlight, too, that you're like, not only do you need the ritual material, the ritual spell, and the monster, you need all of that with a hand limit of 5.
Yeah, so rituals are basically off the table. Like, you can get them to work, and it's a lot of finesse, but at the end of the day, probably not worth it.
Yeah, it would just take a lot to keep that working. So after we've knocked you know, a lot of these as being pointless, why do I say this is more fun than regular Yu-Gi-Oh for me? So are you good with me getting into that now?
Yeah, I think we should clarify that by pointless in the sense of
Not optimal.
yes. So I started the game and my intention was to finish it in 4 hours.
Yes, which you could potentially do. And I don't think that's bad. Something that I get annoyed about a lot with RPGs that let you traverse the world and stuff a lot is that sometimes things take a really long time. Like, I'm like, oh, I'm not quite sure where I'm supposed to go. Or even if I do know, you know, I need to go from point A to point B. Well, it's going to take you 20 to 30 minutes to walk from point A to point B. I'm like, eh. In this game, the environments are not too big, and you have a sprint button that moves you along pretty fast. So you can just run right where you want to go and check out what you want to check out. But okay, so the comparison between this and actual Yu-Gi-Oh! And sort of my thoughts on the way Yu-Gi-Oh! Has evolved as a game or devolved. So one of the things that I think is really strong about this game is, and early Yu-Gi-Oh! In general, is that there's not a whole lot of effect monsters. You can just move right on through. And I'm doing this to make a point. I want to read you guys a normal, or I would say this is kind of standard for today. I want to read you guys a Yu-Gi-Oh! Card in full. Please bear with me. So this is the card Endymion, the Mighty Master of Magic. He is a dark type. He's 7 stars. He is a pendulum monster, which I can't even explain to you how that works. He has an attack of 2,800 and a defense of 1,700. Okay, here is the card. Are you familiar with this card at all, Daniel?
I am not, but I'm following where you're going with this.
Okay. Yeah, here is the effect text. This is in the bottom half of his card. You can remove 6 spell counters from your field. Special summon this card from the Pendulum Zone. Then count the number of cards you control that can have a spell counter. Destroy up to that many cards on the field, and if you do, place spell counters on this card equal to the number of cards destroyed. You can only use this effect of Endymion, the Mighty Master of Magic, once per turn. And then in a second text box, it says Spellcaster Pendulum Effect. Once per turn, when a spell/trap card or effect is activated, quick effect, you can return 1 card you control with a spell counter to the hand. And if you do, negate the activation. And if you do that, destroy it. Then you can place the same number of spell counters on this card that the return card had. While this card has a spell counter, your opponent cannot target it with card effects. Also, it cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. When this card, with a spell counter, is destroyed by battle, you can add 1 normal spell from your deck to your hand. That's the end. Did you get all that? If not, in a real duel, when your opponent plays that, you're going to have to read it again. And then again. It's really frustrating that for every single card in modern day Yu-Gi-Oh, I feel like it's just a novel. And I've seen people say, well, it's because you don't have what Magic has, which is keywords. You don't have things that sum up all of this in a quick and efficient way. And my answer to that is, Even if there were keywords, I don't care. That's too much. We're getting to the point where you would need like 6 to 7 keywords. And that's too much. It's not fun. To me, it's just too much to keep track of. And I get that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has kind of become that game. But I shouted out earlier, and I'll do it again. I enjoy watching Team APS on YouTube. It's a group of guys that is still passionate about Yu-Gi-Oh, both past and present. But they also talk very frankly about the state of the game and how things go. And it's like, yeah, if you go to tournaments these days, you're going to run into people that have methods to win the game on turn 2. And sometimes turn 1 if you don't have a spell card that counters what they're doing. It's just mountains and mountains of text. And to me, it just has not been a fun experience in a really long time. And it's made it hard to, if I want to go back and be like, oh, I'll try this out again. There's so much that I just don't know where to begin. And this is not like, oh, this is a guy that doesn't know anything about card games or is a beginner. I've played tons of card games, and I played Yu-Gi-Oh! For like 10 plus years. But I still cannot begin to tell what is going on. And if I want to know, I've got to, pause and read everything multiple times. And each card that I have to read takes me a really long time. And I understand that it's like, well, the game has to evolve. It has to change. I fully understand that. But it just, you have to realize at some point, because I know some people will say, but I like that. I like that there's, a novel of text on each card, because that lets me do a lot of crazy things that I want to do, and it gives you more customization. And the answer is yes. Yes, it does. But if you want your game to be able to sustain itself, you need new players coming in. And I don't think there's a large influx of new players to Yu-Gi-Oh! For this reason. Because it's really daunting, and it's just so much to get into a single deck that's being played. I don't know, people are not going to get super invested and keep trying to do all this when it's this complicated. And I've seen a couple of different solutions. I've seen some people like Team APS, Paul there has proposed a legacy format where you can only play cards up to a certain year. And I think that could be potentially really good and a way to get people like me back in. But it also wouldn't help if the way a lot of other games do their legacy format is they say the legacy format's going to be, let's say 10 years behind our current game. Well, then if eventually we're going to still get back to this, I still don't think that's a good idea for longevity. I think you need a legacy format that goes up to GX kind of. And just, maybe you can include GX. I'm not sure how broken things got at that point. How much that invalidates the old cards. Yeah, you could still get me back into this if you made it so, yeah, all your old cards, you can still play with those. And not every monster has a crazy effect, and not every spell is completely ridiculous. And you could just add new monsters just for different flavor text, and I would be interested in that. Like, it wouldn't have to be, it's like, well, what are we going to do? Add another 1,200 attack monster? We already have a bunch of those. Like, yeah, you would. So I don't know. That's just kind of my input, and that's why I feel like the Sacred Cards is a great game, because it didn't focus too hard on the original rules of Yu-Gi-Oh, but it's not too hard to pick up. And to me, it kind of focused on the spirit of the game more than the game itself. And that's what I think kept Yu-Gi-Oh going so strong for so long, because the show definitely did not use the rules properly. But the show and the manga were also not about the trading card game we have in real life. The trading card game's inspired by that, but it was about the soul of it, the story of it, the kind of character of the cards that I feel like is just sort of missing now. And I know that like the response is going to be like, well, you're just kind of old, you're too old for it at this point. But I'm like, the data shows us that kids are not getting, as excited about the new booster set as we did back in the day. Yugi throwing out Blackluster Soldier for the first time was, I would say, way more exciting. Whatever we're cobbling together today, I wish I could name more. But I think it's kind of indicative that I actually do tangentially pay attention to Yu-Gi-Oh! Still. I do still watch Yu-Gi-Oh! Games be played. I still watch content around Yu-Gi-Oh! I still follow the game, and I can't name very many or really any of the new cards because I just don't care. It just became more about the text on the card than the connection you had to that monster through that character or through your own experiences, I think. So I think that's kind of the end of my rant or my rambling. But yeah, I think I'm always going to like the sacred cards because it reminds me of a simpler time. A simpler time it made maybe even a bit simpler. But it's fun, and when you throw out that field spell and you watch the entire field change, and your Pump King gets a small attack boost, and now he's a little more usable. It was just fun. The cast of characters was still really likable and fun. Yeah, I just really cared for the identity of the game back then a lot more than what it is now.
Mm-hmm. And I think that maybe like the limitations of the Game Boy at the time probably helped it, that it couldn't go crazy with the like special effect monsters. Like there are only so many effects that could be realistically added to be within the confines of like the creative measures of the game.
Yeah, because some of the cards, and to be fair, I think also, like I said, there were not as many effects back then. So
Right.
there wasn't that much to take into consideration. But yeah, there were a couple that it was like, are we going to, program an entire new set of logic for our card game simulator for a single card? No. The answer
Yeah.
is no. We're just going to make it do something kind of close to what it used to do. That for, maybe a beginner would be much easier to wrap your head around.
For all the deck-based things I've been a part of, the ones I have the most fun with are the ones that don't require me to like over plan. Where it's like, oh well, if he has this card in his deck, I can't have more than 3 cards in my hand. I have to jump in a circle while I take my turn. I have to like bend over backwards, and I'm not allowed to look at the playing surface for 3 minutes. Like the more you slow it down, like I was a big fan of the Lord of the Rings card game. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all.
Not at all.
So there's the Lord of the Rings card game, and it's very convoluted. But I loved collecting the cards and having the different characters and stuff. So I have this like massive collection of Lord of the Rings cards. But like even like reading the directions to the game is like a mind pretzel. So like I never like officially learned how to play. There's a lot of like location cards, and then you get player cards that have again like special effects and different things that they do about like moving along the player map, whatever the player map might be. The fun is from the simplicity, not in spite of it.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. Because the way that I've had the most success or the most fun with trading card games, and I know it, you might think, oh, Freudian slip to say success, that's when you win. The way I'm defining success is that I can convince a friend or a girlfriend to sit down and play a couple of rounds of this with me, or a family member that is not invested in 60 seasons of a TV show. Yeah. I can sit down and say, this is a fun game. We're going to play it tonight, and it's going to take me 5 minutes to get you brought up to speed. We'll do a couple of example back and forths, and then you'll know you'll be good. You'll be up to where I am, and we can go from there. And so my favorite current one that just ended support, which sucks, was Fire Emblem Cypher, because it's simple enough to explain, and there's not that many exceptions. that I could get lots of people to play it with me very frequently. Whereas Yu-Gi-Oh, it would be very hard for me to find somebody today to play with unless I go to my local game store, which then I would just get stomped all the time. But I couldn't play with friends and family that way. And the other thing that was really nice was I still get excited about buying card packs of the Fire Emblem card game. And the reason for that is kind of like what Daniel was saying with the Lord of the Rings game, is that even if I do not get any rares at all, I have a connection with these characters that goes beyond their card rarity. So if I get, let's say Zyhark is a character from Fire Emblem I really like. So if I open a pack and I get Zyhark in a variant that I don't have, I'm excited because I like that character, even if he's the most common rarity. So I still feel like that hit of dopamine, and I won, sort of, that you get from opening card packs. Let's be honest about it. But if I open a pack of Yu-Gi-Oh cards today, even if I get that super rare shiny card, I'm like, okay, like it doesn't mean anything to me. It's just like, I don't think about how good, it's not as exciting with how good the card is. It's more about, do I like it? I guess I enjoy playing games for the characters in those games. And so you've got to make me care about those characters to keep me invested.
Cool. Well, that was like a nice little mic drop. Do you want to wrap up there?
We can. I want to be clear one more time and just reiterate, I don't hate Yu-Gi-Oh or anything, and this is not an attack. If you like the novel of a game that it's become, I think that's awesome, and I'm really happy that you like it. I really do. And I think it's still a really unique game, and there's a reason that it's stuck around so long when so many others have come and gone. I just hope that it keeps sticking around, because Yu-Gi-Oh is a big part of my childhood and a big part of a lot of people's childhood. And I think that Takahashi created a really awesome world, and I want to just keep seeing it thrive. And I think we all of us want that. So about it, Yu-Gi-Oh is pretty cool. Sacred cards. I don't know what it would take to get your hands on a copy of this game today, but if you have methods, you should definitely play it today. I would absolutely recommend it. And with Daniel's tips and stuff, yeah, you could win it in definitely a day. I'm curious. Do I want to look at what the speedrun board is for it?
It'd be hard to speedrun a card-based game just because, again, algorithms. But
RNG is the word you're looking for, I think.
That's probably the gamer word for it.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so here is Yu-Gi-Oh! The Sacred Cards. The fastest it has been beaten at the time of recording was 5 months ago on an emulator for the Game Boy Advance by an American, and it took him 30 minutes and 15 seconds.
I would be very curious as to how that fast.
You always have to include a video with it, so you can actually go watch that fast on speedrun.com if you want.
I think it took me 35 minutes, so just kind of cut the difference.
Then that would place you in third place. Oh, I love this guy's name. The fourth place, it's the third place guy currently. His name is Cards of the Heart.
Very cool. So how about we wrap it there? Thank you everybody for listening. You can find us on Apple Podcasts at the Turn by Turn Podcast. If you'd leave a 5-star review, a nice rating, a nice comment. Let us know if you want Chris's episode on some other potential Yu-Gi-Oh game that might exist, potentially for GameCube or some other system.
Yes.
Where can they find you in the world of the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at Chris_Harkey, and you can rant at me about Yu-Gi-Oh! If you want to. I would love to talk with you about it. You can also find me on YouTube at Nihil, Nihil, where I am usually playing a Shining Force game or an SRPG of some sort. But who knows? This has given me the hankering to do Yu-Gi-Oh! A little bit, so you never know. Might do that for a one-off. Maybe some Dungeon Dice Monsters. That would be kind of fitting in with my brand a little more. But yeah, come find me there. Talk to me about Yu-Gi-Oh! Talk to me about whatever. Great. And find the Turn by Turn show on Twitter at TurnByTurnPod, right?
Yep, that's us.
Yes, so you can always message us there as well, and we'll always be happy to talk with you about any kind of gaming, anything.
And if you have ideas for episodes that you'd like to hear us talk about, drop us comments. But until next time, bye.
Trust in the heart of the cards.
May the cards be with you always. Bye.